Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. We will be starting soon.
Where is it? Microsoft PowerPoint. This is it. This is it.
Hello, good morning. I would truly appreciate if anyone who is participating could have their camera on so we could have a collaborative and engaging discussion today. So let's get started. My name is Aysan. Welcome to our CSW69 parallel event promoting resilience, mental health, and leadership among refugee women. I'm a master's student at Teachers College, Columbia University, and I'm a mental health counseling intern and a dedicated social justice advocate. I'm truly honored to serve as the moderator for today's important discussion. This event will be proudly sponsored by the International Association of Applied Psychology, or IAAP, an organization dedicated to advancing psychological science and its application to real-world challenges. It is also co-sponsored by the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, or IAYSP, which is an organization that aims to advance world peace by empowering youth and students to become global citizens through character education and peace projects supporting the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I've had the privilege of engaging with IAYSP and witnessing firsthand their commitment to fostering leadership and resilience among young people, particularly those in underserved communities. Their dedication to peace building and empowerment deeply aligns with today's discussion on amplifying the voices and leadership of refugee rights. We are very grateful for the support of both our co-sponsors in amplifying this important conversation on the mental health and leadership of refugee women. A heartfelt thank you to the NGO and New York Forum for this 2025 Commission on the Status of Women for providing this platform to address such an urgent and necessary topic. As we gather here today, it's crucial to acknowledge the unique challenges faced by refugee and migrant women. According to UN Women, nearly half of the world's 244 million migrants and 19.6 million refugees are women. At the same time, 1 in 8 people globally live with a mental health condition, as reported by the World Health Organization. Refugees and women face significant stress before, during, and after displacement, making them especially vulnerable to mental health challenges. Research shows they experience much higher rates of depression, anxiety, and PTSD compared to host communities, with women and girls even at greater risk. For instance, a study by Blackmore and colleagues that was conducted in 2020 found that among 81,866 refugees and conflict-affected individuals, 30% suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, rates that remain high even after displacement. This highlights the need for early and ongoing mental health support extending beyond initial resettlement to ensure the well-being of refugees and asylum seekers. Women and girls in particular face additional challenges such as displacement trauma and gender-based violence, often with limited access to mental health care and social support. Addressing these barriers is critical to promoting their resilience and recovery. Yet, despite the psychological challenges and trauma, refugee women have immense resilience. Despite facing systemic barriers, they continue to lead, advocate, and build stronger communities. Our discussion will explore the intersection of mental health, resilience, and leadership, highlighting challenges, solutions, and strategies to create a more inclusive world where refugee women can thrive. We are privileged to have an incredible panel of speakers today who bring expertise, insights, and advocacy to this discussion. Now, let me begin by introducing our esteemed panelists. Let me pin them here so you can see them. It is my great honor to introduce my professor, Dr. Judy Kriansky, who is an internationally renowned clinical psychologist, humanitarian, and UN advocate. For over 20 years, she has served as the main NGO representative for the International Association of Applied Psychology and the World Council for Psychotherapy at the United Nations, where she has played a pivotal role in advancing mental health and psychosocial support in global policies, including the Global Compact on Migration and the UN 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. A first responder for decades, Dr. Judy has provided psychosocial support in post-disaster zones worldwide, from Haiti and Japan to Iran and Jordan. She has also been a key advocate for mental health inclusion in global development policies, assisting in the adoption of UN General Assembly resolutions on mental health and psychosocial support. As an adjunct professor at Teachers College Columbia University, she has mentored the students on migration and refugee issues and co-developed a girls' empowerment camp in Africa. Her remarkable contributions have earned her numerous accolades, including the prestigious President's Lifetime Achievement Award for her dedicated volunteer service. In addition, she's an award-winning author, journalist, and media pioneer with her latest book, Coming to America: Psychosocial Experiences and Adjustment of Migrants, offering critical insights into the challenges faced by displaced populations. Dr. Judy has been an incredible mentor to me and many of my peers, offering guidance and invaluable opportunities. She generously supported me in presenting my podcast project at the Sierra Leone Mission CSW site event at the United Nations headquarters. Today, Dr. Judy will share her expertise on the psychological impact of displacement, trauma-informed approaches, and resilience-building strategies for refugees. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for being here, and welcome.
Oh, you're so gracious, Aysan, and I'm so proud of you. Really, look at you doing your event here for the Commission on the Status of Women, and also that you were so fantastic speaking at a side event that was sponsored by the Mission of Sierra Leone about your work on your podcast, where you're interviewing women from around the world about all their issues. I'm so proud of you. I'm sitting here actually at the United Nations right now in the Delegates Lounge. You might hear people talking because there's lots of issues going on about women, as you mentioned, about the Commission on the Status of Women that's going on right now. And there are two important issues that are very critical for the UN. One is the involvement of youth, and there you are, being such a great example of youth being interested in international issues. Also, among all the issues globally that the UN is concerned about, very concerned about women's equality and empowerment, and also included in that refugees. So I am going to give an overview of some of the things that have happened, advances in that global scene and agreements about refugeeism. That's very critical. So I'll share my screen now. And you did a beautiful introduction that is about these issues. Well, now what's going on with my screen here?
Thank you so much, Dr. Judy. Thank you so much for your kind words and encouraging me as always. Can you please allow me to continue introducing all the panel speakers before we start? I think that can give an understanding to our audience
okay.
we're going to be talking about.
I
But yeah,
see.
thank you very much. We are going to start in few minutes.
Okay.
So unfortunately, our second panelist speaker is not here yet. She had an emergency with a client, but she will be joining us soon. So I'm just gonna move on introducing her, but she's not here yet with us yet, but she will join you soon. So her name is Dr. Panu. I am also thrilled to introduce Dr. Panu, who grew up in Myanmar, and she has lived in the United States for the past 12 years while pursuing her education. She completed an undergraduate degree and conducted research in neuroscience in Montana State University before earning her master's and PhD in clinical psychology at the University of Vermont. Her clinical specialty is the treatment of PTSD and anxiety disorders, and she is passionate about making evidence-based treatments culturally sensitive and accessible in resource-limited communities like her own. As a researcher, Dr. Panu has been involved in resilience research with refugee populations. For her dissertation, she collected data from her Myanmar community amid the ongoing crisis following the military coup. She is currently a postdoctoral clinician at Harvard Medical School, Mass General Hospital, where she enjoys her clinical work, continues her research efforts in Myanmar, and mentors younger students and clinicians in both the United States and Myanmar. She's also the founder of an online initiative, Resilient Myanmar, through which she is providing mental health education training, grief support groups, community-based trauma healing, psychosocial support interventions with her collaborators in Myanmar. We will welcome her soon. Another panelist is Farishta Taeb. It is my great pleasure to introduce a remarkable leader who has dedicated her career to advocating for mental health, education, and the empowerment of underserved communities. She is representing the Global Emergency Response and Assistance, GERA, where she serves as an advisor and advocate for the refugee populations in New Jersey. But her role does not end there. As a program director for one of New Jersey's largest domestic violence agencies, she has worked tirelessly to protect survivors and create safer communities. Farishta is also a co-author of a groundbreaking handbook providing practical tools for delivering services to underserved populations, and her work has been featured in the New York Times. Her impact has earned her numerous awards, including recognition from the Insider NJ and the Eva Stitt Award from the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health and Development. As a candidate for the New Jersey Assembly in District 12, Farishta is committed to bridging gaps in mental health services, advocating for families, fostering policies that create a stronger, more inclusive communities. Today, she will share her insights on the barriers refugee women face in accessing mental health services and the role of multi-sector partnerships in providing trauma-informed, culturally competent care. Welcome, Ms. Taib. It's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Honor to be here.
Thank you. Another panel speaker that we have is Ms. Michaela Lala. She's an exceptional panelist who's joining us from Rome, representing the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace. It is my honor to introduce Michaela Lala, the Deputy Secretary General of the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace, or IAYSP, in Europe and the Middle East region. Michaela has over 6 years of experience working in NGOs, civil society, and peace-building initiatives. She has played a pivotal role in designing and implementing leadership programs that foster community resilience and peace. Beyond her role at IAYSB, Michaela has contributed to impactful programs with organizations such as YSB Balkan, focusing on empowering underserved communities. She has also been recognized for her expertise in project management, advocacy, and legal research, leveraging her background in international and European law to strengthen human rights frameworks. Today, Michaela will share her insights on how leadership programs can be tailored to empower refugee girls as community leaders and how we can ensure the sustainability of leadership initiatives that support their resilience and agency. Welcome, Ms. Lala. It's an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining us from a different time zone.
Same. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm honored and very happy that together, like that, I can present the work that YSP is doing in EUMI level, and especially regarding this topic that's very close to our hearts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can't wait to hear your valuable insights. So let's begin. Dr. Judy Kriansky will open our event with an overview of international frameworks for migrants and refugees, setting the stage for our discussion. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy. And I think the question that I have from you is that, You have spent over 22 years at the United Nations working on global mental health and refugee issues. Could you provide an overview of key international policy advancements related to migrants and refugees while also addressing the psychological challenges they face?
Okay, so what a distinguished panel you have gathered together. It's so impressive, really, what you are doing. So as part of this overview, let me actually get the full screen slideshow. Let's see, full screen, play from the spot. There we go. Okay, great. So as I mentioned, the issue of refugee is extremely important, particularly for certain groups that are under conflict that the UN is very concerned about. So what you see here is the ECOSOC chamber at the UN, where many of these meetings go on with those diamonds that are in the background there. As you had mentioned, I've done trainings of Syrian refugees in Jordan and focusing really on children because the children are have tremendous issues psychologically adjusting, and they don't talk about those issues. So it shows up in their behavioral problems. And so you see their group that we have run in Jordan and also in other places. And below that, on the right, you see the women from all over the world of different religions that I have trained in how to work with children using play, because play and singing is very international and universal rather than words. There are many conferences that go on, as you see in the picture below there, about refugees. That you see here one that this is people from Portugal. Portugal is an outstanding country in being really advanced in how they invite refugees into their country. So psychological conferences are very focused on what you said is the title of the book that I put together, Psychosocial Experiences and Adjustment of Migrants, but there also are chapters in there about refugees, because many times, although there are separate concerns and separate issues related to them, the psychological dynamics can be very simple, very similar. The UN agency that is involved in refugees, you see here UNHCR, has done many policy papers and reports there that you see, the Global Compact on Refugees that I will talk about in a minute. Which is extremely important. So there's the symbol of the UNHCR, the office at the United Nations with a High Commissioner for Refugees, which was established by the UN General Assembly agency that leads and coordinates all the international action to protect refugees and resolve the refugee problems worldwide. So it's very important to know that there is a basis here at this building that I'm in right now about real concern for the issues of refugees. Of course, the UN was founded right after World War II in 1951. I'm just giving you an overview of some of the history of the concern about refugees. It was a convention about refugees, and key legal documents were first set and defining the term refugee, which is important, and outlining the rights and the international standards of the treatment for their protection. Then, as you could see, what's really critical is that in 2015, the UN agenda was set for 2030 for sustainable development, it's called. That means that 193 countries, member states of the United Nations, as I said, where I am here, came up with this framework that you see there, 17 goals. And the fifth goal that they agreed they would accomplish by the year 2030, they're not doing very well because greatly set back by COVID. And number 5 is gender equality and the empowerment of women, which is part of what Aysan's doing this event for. In another touchstone is that in the year 2000, in October, this is extremely important, the United Nations Security Council, which is the 15 governments who really are the center of being concerned about peace and security at this building here and for the world, came up with a resolution called 1325. That's the number of it, and we refer to it as 1325. that historic watershed political framework shows how the gender perspective is relevant to negotiating all the agreements, planning refugee camps it refers to, and peacekeeping operations and reconstructing war-torn societies for sustainable peace. But it's important to notice that they really did reference to refugees and identified rape as a weapon of war. The Women, Peace, and Security agenda really impacts the fact that they're enhancing women's participation in peace-building operations and protection and post-conflict recovery. This is extremely important, obviously, for refugees who are leaving a country, often not just because of economics, but conflict in their country. So you see there 1325. That's what we call this major resolution that is referred to. Now, what's really critical here at the UN as setting the stage for you is the Pact for the Future. This was just agreed upon just at the end of last year. And that is the framework that looks at what is the future for all the governments of the world, looking at all the issues of crisis and conflict around the world and also climate change. And then it is important for you to know and see here that in one of the targets, it specifically mentions not only persons with disabilities, internally displaced persons, but also refugees, because there's great concern for peoples who are marginalized. And so that is critical for you to know that these agreements exist that are really supporting refugees that Aysan has been talking about. Technology is extremely important. As part of the Pact of the Future was the Global Digital Compact, because everything is technological now. Obviously, we're on Zoom, and everybody was on Zoom during COVID. And so there are many these kinds of AI chatbots and everything to try to empower refugees, give them a way to communicate. And the UNHCR, the Agency for Refugees, and all the peoples there are very concerned about how to protect refugees, and particularly female and women refugees and children when in this age of technology. So that is extremely important for everybody to know that's being a concern. Now, the High Commissioner for Refugees, as I mentioned, the person who is at the head of the UN agency, interestingly enough, used to be the Secretary General of the United Nations, who is the head of this entire collection of 193 nations, and was also, interestingly, a woman, Her Excellency Michelle Bachelet, who has been the president of Chile. So there are groups now that are focused on refugees for respect and safety and the dignity for refugees. One of them is Together, a UN campaign that focuses on refugees and migrants. Sometimes they're put together, sometimes they're kept separate. That was launched in 2016 to counter discrimination that exists about refugees. And there's a growing coalition of member states in the private sector and NGOs, civil society committed to that. Here are just some of the booklets and policy papers. They're all on the internet that you really can find about operational guidance for mental health and psychosocial support, what we call MHPSS for refugee operations, and the mental health and psychosocial support and child protection for Syrian refugees. That is very important. Obviously, another very important population that the UN is extremely focused on is the issues that's happening for Afghanistan refugees. Now, this is also critical. It's the UN General Assembly, UNGA, I have their resolution in 2001 in recognition of the 50th anniversary of that convention I mentioned about in 2051 relating to the status of refugees, and setting up June 20th, that's coming up soon, as the World Day for Refugees, the World Refugee Day, to understand the plight and the difficulties and build up the resilience that really Aysan is very concerned about, and many of our other panelists here, which coincides with African Refugee Day on the issues of solidarity and inclusion and standing together. overseen by the UN High Commissioner for Refugees that I mentioned before, and supporting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because that's extremely important when we think about the situation of refugees, recognizing the rights of people who seek asylum from protection from their in other countries. So now, as I mentioned to you, it's very important to set the stage, and I'm talking very quickly to make this go so we can get to the other people, and I'll be finished soon. Is that there was originally a summit on refugees in September of 2016, which I attended. And at first, this summit, as I mentioned, was for migrants and refugees together. And then actually it was recognized, as you see there, the UN Summit for Refugees and Migrants. And then what happened is that it got separated into two compacts. A compact is really a framework or an agreement. And you see here that the two compacts on the left there is refugees, and on the right for migrants. And so these two compacts define that refugees are people who are forced to leave their country of origin under the fear of persecution and conflict and circumstances, and migrants being people who change their country not and their legal status, and they make the conscious choice to change. So there's a little bit of difference, although sometimes people think of them in a similar way. And these processes developed differently. The Compact for Refugees was overseen by the UNHCR, that Commission for Refugees that I mentioned, the Special Agency for Refugees, and the Migrants Compact was overseen by the governments and intergovernmental discussions, which I actually, as you see in the picture on the bottom there, that there were many times that we had there is a committee for refugees of NGOs that I belong to, and migrants also. And so we met with all the governments, including Britain and the EU and even Russia. So we all split up and saw different governments in order to really influence the psychological issues in these compacts. And then I went with one of my students to Morocco, where the governments were meeting together to talk about what's going to happen. But what I wanted to point out here very quickly is that the psychological issues are included in both these compacts. Different wording, but you see there listed there that for the Compact on Migrants, the word psychosocial is used 3 times. The word mental health is used twice. The word resilience is used 7 times. It's a big word at the UN. And for migrants, they have included the words on counseling, psychosocial also, psychological assistance, mental health twice, mental integrity, not quite a word that we use in the psychological community, but they do that, and also resilience, which is extremely, as I mentioned, a very big issue here at the UN. Mexico took leadership in the Global Compact on Migration. They had a team of 4 people working on it from their mission. 3 of them were women, 1 was a man, and set up a group of friends. I wanted to show you this to let you know that there are countries that are really in the forefront of caring about these issues, chaired by Mexico, Benin, and Ireland, which is very involved in all these issues, and 26 countries. So you see there the Mexican delegate there who was on that committee, and then the conference that I mentioned that was happening in Morocco that was discussing all these issues. So there's then knowing that this particular compact, everybody should know about it to know that the rights are affirmed by the government. And so if there's going to be advocacy by anybody on the ground, they really need to understand that. There are gender-specific words in those compacts. There's a lot of references to women, a lot of references to children, and also to recognize that men and boys also need to be considered when you consider the rights of women and girls. As we know, that's very important. There are lots of risks for children, especially the girl child, about malnutrition, sex abuse, and exploitation, transactional sex, having sex with men for money to help the family, separation from their parents, and women having many questions also about how to apply, how to really adjust to the new country in the workforce, and particularly with domestic violence. So that's a very important issue. And as I mentioned, There are also questions for men about this. Widowers who have lots of survivor guilt when they've been crossing the country and other children die in that, and facing the gender roles about the fact that there are stigmas about men and how they don't have any money and what are they supporting the family and many of these issues. Another important word I'll just point out very quickly is that there are climate refugees, that people whose countries, my God, are sinking because of the rising sea level, many of them because of the hurricanes added to that particular problem, particularly in the Caribbean and in the Pacific Island states. We're really concerned about that here at the United Nations. There fortunately are issues, as Aysan had mentioned before, all the psychological issues, the emotional issues of the fears and the nightmares and the self-blame and the shame and the guilt, the cognitive problems of worrying, the physical problems of headaches and stomach aches, behavioral problems of irritability, interpersonal conflicts, and spiritual crises even, according to their own religions, about what is life all about. And very, very quickly, psychologically, there is the question for refugees of what does it mean to have a home, as you see here, and the sense of self and belonging. Where do I belong? To what is my culture now? And how do I maintain what my culture is? And very complex issues about identity and particularly facing violence. So ending with recommendations. We need to be very, very cautious and clear and attentive to gender-sensitive issues in mental health, reaching out to refugee women and children, focusing on the community strategies to educate particularly women and girls about abuse, especially respecting the culture and religious traditions, redefining this new word now that's even being used at the UN about mindset, besides stereotype and stigma, which is very important here at the UN, and consideration of not only women with men. So thank you so much. And Aysan, I'm so proud of you for doing this. Bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for your valuable insights. And we are very grateful for all the contributions you have made. It really seems that there are significant efforts have been made to address displacement issues with advancements, like the Global Compact on Refugees that you mentioned. It seems that it played a key role in shaping policies and responses. However, I'm still concerned because it seems that despite these advancements in mental health policy, refugee women still face significant barriers to accessing care. So I want to shift at this point from policy to practice a little bit. I want to invite Ms. Taib. Ms. Taib, based on your work with refugees at JERA, what do you see as the most common barriers preventing refugee women from accessing mental health services, whether stigma, financial constraints, legal obstacles, language barriers, or maybe lack of culturally competent care? What do you think are the significant barriers? And also, I would appreciate if you also address that importance of partnerships for progress. What role do you think grassroots initiatives, NGOs, mental health professionals, the private sector, the governments can play in overcoming these barriers?
Sure. Thank you so much, Aysan, for your for having us here today and for all of your lovely words that you said earlier about us. I wanted to kind of piggyback a little bit. I have a little bit of a different approach. So I don't have slides. I'm actually going to walk you through a case study. And essentially in 2021, Operation Allies Welcome started. That's when over 80,000 Afghans were evacuated from Afghanistan and were brought to 8 military bases here in the United States. In August of 2021, I was working at one of those military bases doing mental health triaging as a volunteer. And I started to realize that real change was very difficult to do without actually having a seat at the table. So in December, I was appointed by the US government, one of the federal agencies, as a trauma-informed cultural advisor. And that role was a very important role when it came to the mental health status of individuals who were at that particular safe haven. And I want to go back to something that Dr. Judy said about the mind right? I think it's very important to know and understand, and I'm going to walk you through the story of, the story's not fabricated, but the names, of course, will be fabricated. We're going to use Miriam as a generic name. I met Miriam at the military base, and I want to walk you through the process of where her mind was at. Miriam had gone through the triple trauma paradigm, which is pre-flight, in-flight, and finally she's here. And she had gone through multiple layers of trauma. And the first thing that happens when dealing with her or other refugees is your mindset. Where is the mindset of an individual? The mind of an individual who has been displaced is constantly in fear, constantly anxious, constantly trying to know and understand what the next thing is going to be. So the first part of your question, I would say, normalizing conversations about mental health. Of course, we know that there's a stigma. I think I would be wasting a lot of people's time if I spoke about the actual stigma. There is an inherent stigma in probably, I would argue, 75% of the world. I don't think there's any place that stigma doesn't necessarily, live. And I think what ends up happening is somebody like Miriam comes to the US and is afraid. She's afraid because she's having feelings that she can't share. And why can't she share them? Because she doesn't want people to think she's crazy. Because in her culture, people that have mental health disorders are not normal, quote unquote, right? Or are going to be called crazy, are not going to have a chance to get married because nobody wants to give their daughter to somebody who's quote unquote crazy. What will people say about her? She comes from a collective society. So people are going to be constantly worried about what the neighbors will think, what the family would think. Very different than the individualistic society that we live here in the US. So normalizing conversations and changing the way we approach this. So instead of saying, hey, Miriam, I think you have PTSD, how about saying, hey, Miriam, it's okay to be afraid. This is very scary, validating what Miriam is going through. And essentially, Miriam came to me as a very young, shy, scared person. And the reason why she related to me and why I was able to get through to her was because we spoke the same language. We had so many women at the safe haven who were trying to say things. And once, on the safe haven, we had a lot of interpreters. But once they got off the safe haven, for example, and they wanted to access help, they weren't able to because there's a language barrier. And language doesn't just mean that somebody's bilingual. It's very hard to be a behavioral health interpreter without having training. You cannot be somebody who's a medical interpreter cannot necessarily deal with somebody who is in the behavioral health field in the same manner. Because when you have a medical issue and you break your arm, everybody can see the cast, right? Everybody sees a physical cast that the person's wearing, and you could physically identify what's happening. But when an individual is suffering or has something in the mental health realm, we can't necessarily see that. So saying things to Miriam like, you know what, sometimes we do get sad. Do you have other medical issues? Yeah, I have diabetes. Do you take insulin when you have diabetes? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so why wouldn't you take a medication, for example, if you suffer from something like depression? Changing the way we say things and making them relatable to individuals is going to be key. Having these conversations in places where refugees attend is going to be key. Why aren't we talking about this at local faith places like the mosque? Why aren't we talking about this at schools where children are suffering, right? Especially female children from a lot of these things that are happening. I would say legal status is another reason, right? I'm not legal. I don't want to rock the boat. Maybe I'll lose my status if they think that I have a problem and that I'm not mentally stable. Maybe they won't give me asylum. Maybe they'll take my green card away from me. Again, going back to what's in the mind, which is fear. So we have to be agents of change and start to eliminate this fear, right? We have to start helping folks. But how can we do that if we don't have competent care? How can I understand you, see you, and hear you if I don't understand your culture? Right? I've taken individuals, for example, like let's say Miriam. I take Miriam to the clinic, and Miriam has a practitioner who does not have cultural competence training. And Miriam says, you know, I feel really pressured to wear my headscarf because it's something I did back home, but I feel a certain way about wearing it here. And guess what? Guess what the person who doesn't have cultural competence care says to Miriam? Why do you have to cover your hair? That's so oppressive. This is America. You have the right to do whatever you want to do. That person doesn't get through to Miriam because that person doesn't understand that Miriam identifies in a culture and a religion that promotes modesty. But if that person has cultural competence training, they would know that this individual comes from a region. But you would be surprised that 9 out of 10 times that is not the case. So if you're dealing with the refugee community, the first thing you want to do, and I did this a lot, whether it was an attorney that was doing pro bono work, whether it was a mental health care provider, whether it was a teacher, anybody who's having one-on-one access with this community has to have cultural competence training and needs to understand, because that's the first step. I understand, Miriam, what you're going through. In our culture, people like to talk about other people's business, right? And they care more about what other people think than what you think as an individual. So that's why it's scary if your neighbor finds out. But guess what? In the US, we have HIPAA. HIPAA doesn't exist in most of the world. Explaining something as simple to us as HIPAA will be life-changing for that individual and will help that individual, knowing that that practitioner is bound by law not to tell her neighbor. That's going to make her open up, right? That's going to help her open up. And I think that's one step. I think another step in overcoming language and cultural barriers is making sure that when we go back to language access, right, making sure that that interpreter is the right language. How many times have we had somebody who says they speak Farsi and they get an Iranian interpreter in the Afghan diaspora, at least, and one word is messed up, and guess what? That can be the difference between somebody's life and death. I'm gonna share another Miriam story with you. Miriam is pregnant, and Miriam's saying, I have so much pain that I feel like it's killing me. That's misinterpreted to say, I don't want this baby anymore. I want to kill it. That's the difference between somebody being admitted to a facility and the difference between an individual like Miriam getting care for pain. This is a true story. This has happened before. There is a story of a woman who was impregnated and she just was suffering from some ailments and there was misinterpretation. And due to that, she ended up, not only was she admitted, but she ended up in prison because she was accused of trying to kill her child. So it's very serious. The words that are used are very serious, and having not only language access, but proper language access. And a lot of refugees don't know and understand that by law, you have to have somebody call a language line if there's not an interpreter there. There's not somebody who's bilingual that's working at a clinic. You must provide that service, and it has to be the right service. So getting through all of these hurdles is going to be very challenging, but it's doable. It's doable, right? Going back to some of the other restraints, for example, insurance, right? Miriam has Medicaid, and in her Medicaid, she's only allowed to have a practitioner, the same practitioner for 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks later, it has to be somebody else from the same practice. How does somebody heal, or how does somebody progress from having PTSD when they have to keep retelling their story? Over and over again, they're re-traumatized, right? How is that therapy helping that person? It's not. It's just bringing that person to a place back to where they were, over and over again. We have to do better. Moving on to policy and partnerships. It's wonderful to collaborate. Partnerships are great. Coalitions, the one that myself and a couple of my colleagues co-lead in New Jersey, we have wonderful things that we offer to one another. That's great, but guess what? We have to do better. How we do better, we got to change policy. We have to have our voice heard in government so that funding can go to the right things. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot provide my services. The services that I provide are suspended. Why? Because the policy that's currently going on right now doesn't give my organization grant money to be able to help folks that are in need. So we need to think twice when we're civically engaged. Who are we putting in those seats? What are we promoting? How are we promoting? Right? That is very important. Policy is very, very important. Participate in those meetings. Go to those meetings because they make a difference. And what you say and what you do will impact the future of somebody's life or death. Suicide prevention is the difference between life and death. Talking somebody off the ledge is the difference between life and death. And we as individuals and as providers and as community partners can't move forward unless policies changed, funding is provided, and holistic health is given. I'm going to end on this note. Coming together and providing a refugee holistic help from head to toe, from what they're thinking to what they're eating to what they're watching to just saying, hey, I'm here. We need to make people feel seen, heard, and understood. And that's the only way that we can heal as a community, as a society, and with our beloved refugees. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Stubb. This was incredible. I agree with you that we need greater representation of mental health professionals in policymaking to ensure that policies addressing displacement and refugee support are effective. But you're also right that we also need to move beyond policies and become agents of change, each and every one of us, to call for competent, trauma-informed, culturally responsive care, and sometimes just be there and show compassion and understanding that it's okay. Yes, the stigma is there. Yes, it's hard. Yes. But it's understandable. You will make it through it. Thank you so much. These challenges are very real. So that's why building resilience among refugee women is just as crucial as advocating for better policies. Now let's turn our attention to resilience, a key factor in refugee mental health. I'm happy Dr. Panu was able to join us. So Dr. Panu, welcome. And I would like to welcome you to share your insights now. Drawing from your experience conducting research on resilience in Myanmar and providing mental health training, what are the most pressing mental health challenges faced by refugee women, and how do these challenges affect their resilience? And I would like you to address how can the global community, including professionals, clinicians, and policymakers, develop innovative and culturally responsive solutions, as Ms. Taib mentioned, that is so important, to strengthen resilience and improve mental health support for underserved refugee communities.
Thank you so much, Aysan. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be with you all. I'm sorry for running a little bit late, coming from a, like a clinical day here at Mass General Hospital in Boston. And wow, fresh start, I just want to start by really, appreciating all that you shared. Oh my God, I am just really grateful to have heard that, and really excited to hear from everybody else, like Dr. Judy and the rest of the panelists. So thank you for having me here. And just like Aysan asked, I really appreciate Aysan, like, these two questions that you're saying, right? Like from my research on resilience, what are the unique obstacles? What are the, huge barriers to care for refugee women? That's the first part I like to share. And the second part, being a resilience researcher, I am always thinking about what is the existing, resiliency of our global refugee women, and how can we foster that, right? Like as clinicians, policymakers, stakeholders who care about these women, and how can we be very creative about that? Because barriers are huge, just like Freshta was talking about. Barriers are so huge, and how can we, as also, leaders and clinicians and providers, especially right now, more barriers are existing in the US. How can we become more creative? That's the part I like to share, like in my second part. So starting from the first part, although I'm presenting research, I like to also, I don't like to be academic. Dr. Judy and I often talked about, I want to be just myself and talk about just like how we would talk to our patients and communities. So I just want to share that I will be sharing about research findings, but I want to put it in the context that we all know this is not, rocket science. Everybody knows the barriers that we do have to overcome to reach the refugee woman. But it does really matter to have the evidence, right? Like to show, like not just the ongoing trauma and systemic barriers. What are other unique kind of stressors our women are experiencing globally? So I really want to kind of highlight, how sort of like layered and complex these challenges are thinking about trauma. When we think about in research, right, like we know violence can trigger more violence psychologically. So one thing we have found is that, there's also like a high level of domestic violence, right? Like issues that happened among different refugee communities. And the survivors of different political violence sometimes have the risk of perpetrating more violence within their homes, right? So what we tend to see is our women, refugee women, not only they're survivors of all of this war and political violence and humanitarian crisis, at the local family level, they are also often the targets of, displaced kind of like blame and shame and physical and sexual and domestic violence, right? Like, so when I think about trauma in different ways, it's just so complex. It's never, with some of my refugee patients, I talked about, all of us in mental health talk about PTSD, which is like post-traumatic stress disorder, but often we don't even get to the post part. There's no P. It's trauma is still ongoing. It's still chronic. It's not over yet. So,
So
how, how can we as clinicians or like, advocates and people who work with our refugee women ensure their safety in their day-to-day lives, right? Like even though they are in the maybe like legally immigration, it's just so complex, right? One, are they safe? Now they safe in their own homes. I remember doing a lot of trauma therapy, right, like to refugee women during like COVID times, to a refugee focused clinic. And speaking of doing a culturally sensitive care fresh start, right? Always having to ask that where are you? Are you good to talk about, because it's not as simple to leave your husband who might also be a perpetrator of some of these violence and trauma they're surviving, because they themselves are also survivors, right? And they need to be together. It's what our patients believe. So that's an example of, it's very tricky for us, but we can make it very patient-centered care by really understanding while trauma is still ongoing in their daily lives, how can we be very, very sensitive and collaborative with them? Another thing we know from research is that even if we as individuals are culturally sensitive and very patient-centered and trying to be there for them, there are just too many other systematic barriers, right? Like language differences, access to interpreters, access to safe home, and access to get to your clinic and hospitals. And then I really appreciated what Fresh Start was talking about that I know from my research is stigma, right? Stigma around seeking help. Um, if you are seen, in the community as knowing Dr. Pani, what does it mean, right? Like, so I think it is our role to really try to speak the same language that they do, right, in the community. When I was in Burlington, Vermont, working as a trauma therapists in the clinic, they call me like mind doctors, like, refugee community, Somali communities, they call mind doctors. And I love that, and that sounds more friendly than therapist or trauma-focused clinicians. And so like kind of, how important the language is. First, I really appreciate that, what you were sharing, whether we talk about trauma education, all the services we provide, we have the opportunity to try to break down some of these barriers, right? Another thing I think a lot about from research is that normalizing mental health as something that all of us need help and can be impacted by, right? Especially amid ongoing crisis. So one analogy I often use with my patients, as well as my community in Myanmar. So I'm originally from Myanmar, and I do a lot of trauma webinar and support to my community, trauma interventions. And one thing I always talk about trauma reactions is that it's not that you're abnormal. Situations are abnormal. You are having normal reactions to abnormal situations, right? Like it's not that, right? Like when you're seeing a psychologist, are you abnormal? It's the fears and stigma that people say. And I would say, no, the world is abnormal with so much violence and cruelty and crisis. And you having the reactions are just normal. I often use the analogy of political violence or wars of, humanitarian crises, a kind of like wildfire, right? Like it's quickly spreading. And for my research on resilience, how can we think about getting to safety? We can't stop the fire. It's going to affect everyone. You're going to get burned to different degrees. But resilience is that even if you cannot stop the fire, we're going to be very creative about getting to safety. We're going to get very creative about addressing your burn wounds together. And that's when I get to my resilience strategies from research. What we know is that we can one, try to remove structural and systematic barriers together. And another way is we could use technology. We could use technology in, telehealth is one of the maybe only positive thing that came out from global pandemic. But that means that I've been helping my communities from Burma, right? Like thousands of miles away. And speaking of resilience, we want to foster existing wisdom, existing collective wisdom. I often talk about intergenerational trauma also comes with intergenerational resilience because you have to survive. You have to survive, right? Like Aysan and the fact that we are here, we are studying, we're giving back to our community is because our ancestors survived, right? Our elders, our parents survived. And I would say refugee resilience is also that tapping in to that existing strategies, or what does it take for you to live through trauma? So by using technology, we've been thinking a lot about mobile clinics is one of the strategies that a lot of, countries and crises are utilizing, right? Like, so mobile clinics used to exist for like tuberculosis or malaria, for example, right? You go to people to distribute medications. And the strategy that we are finding is that maybe we add mental health there while you're doing home visit and you're telling people how to cope with when your kid is suicidal or when you yourself are suicidal. What do you do? Right. And then we teach people right there in their home while you're delivering malaria medications, for example. So that's a mobile clinic. And I've been working with some of the other stakeholders. So in Myanmar, amid ongoing crisis, there's some donors who are trying to work on safe water, right? Like purification water, or like get into different IDP and refugee camps to develop water system. I've been telling them like this is a mental health like worksheets in Burmese. Can you leave them wherever you are at the IDP camps, refugee camps? I would like information can be life-saving. And resilience is about doing everything you can to adapt successfully. So, I'm thinking about it's not just top down, meaning clinicians and all of us going into that. we're also thinking about bottom up. What are they already doing? We can learn a lot from each community. I really believe that, maybe they are like universal features of resilience for all refugee women. There's also unique resiliency for each group, right? Like, so Burmese women, a lot of them are political activists because of the ongoing crisis. So I know like some of the people who are going to be very effective, even better than me in teaching trauma, it's like youth leaders. So I've been training them, helping them how to talk about PTSD or mental health or suicide prevention. Do that. And speaking of technology, another thing, we talk about meeting women where they're at in their home, like through technology, like, online, sometimes also using kind of like platforms or social medias that they trust. A lot of my, community members use like Viber and Signal, and, so I was not very techy in the beginning of the crisis, but I had to learn their language. Okay, this is where we're gonna deliver, right? Like, so speaking of meeting where we're at, that is resilience, right? Like they might not have access to Zoom, but we're gonna try our best to have that confidential private space with the access they have. The last thing I would say is safe houses and crisis interventions are really important. There's no, I think like effective mental health care or trauma healing if there is no basic safety or security, right? Like, so how can we work together? Even amid ongoing crisis like in Myanmar, I have, developed maybe like people who can share their homes or like safe houses, and you share those phone numbers, right? Like, so that's what I mean by being creative about sharing resources and strategies, and conversations like this also is, one way that we are sharing our strategies. One thing I want to end with couple of quotes from women refugee survivors, and Clementine Wamaria, maybe I'm saying it quite right for her name, but Clementine Wamaria is a Rwandan genocide survivor and human rights advocate. One thing she said is that when you have lost everything, you can become anything. When you have lost everything, you can become anything. Speaking of resilience, right? Another one, Malala Yousafzai, that we all know, Nobel laureate and activist, young woman who really believe in education. Malala said that what people call resilience, I call survival. We don't have a choice, but with your help, we can heal. We can heal. So I really love that. Speaking of resilience, we don't want to put the onus on the survivors alone, right? Like, oh, you're resilient. You can keep. I don't want to romanticize resilience like that. People shouldn't be having to resilient like that alone, but they have to be if they have to survive, right? That's what my parents had to do. That's why I'm here. And then the next step is on us. They have survived to heal. They shouldn't be alone. They shouldn't be alone. We as community of, global network, how can we be there? Okay, the last quote I will read is Ihan Omar, who is a Somali refugee and US Congresswoman now. She said, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams and my children's brightest hope. I am my ancestors' wildest dreams and my children's wildest hope. So maybe be that kind of accompanier, supporter of these refugee women who are not only survivors, but the leaders. Yeah, let me pause here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pan. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you for your insights about resilience. What I will remember is what you mentioned, that the fact that you are here, I am here, it means something. It means that there is so much resilience. So what if we tap into that ability that we can move forward despite adversity, and sometimes just come together and just celebrate that. But also the fact that you mentioned that those were beautiful quotes, that yeah, just because you're resilient doesn't mean that you're alone in this, doesn't mean that you don't need to heal, or you don't need help. It is still our job to help you in this process to heal. Thank you. That was very impactful. So it's time now to explore how leadership development can empower refugee communities. It's my pleasure to now invite Miss Lala. Ms. Lala, your work focuses on leadership programs that equip young people with the skills to drive change. Based on your experience at IAYSP, how do you think leadership initiatives can be tailored to empower refugee girls as community leaders? Also, ensuring the sustainability of these programs is essential. What strategies do you think are most effective in maintaining long-term impact to support the resilience and agency of young refugee leaders? You are mute.
Can you
Miss
hear me
Lala?
now?
Yes,
Can you
yes.
hear me now? Sorry. Oh, okay. Just give me a moment. Using two screens. Is that fine now? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, good. So, as I was saying, I'm very happy actually to represent Europe and Middle East on this meeting today, because actually Europe and Middle East, even though this is a global phenomenon, issues that we are facing, Europe for years has been struggling to properly address the issues and the situation created from the refugees and migrants coming, especially from Africa, from Middle East, but not only. Personally speaking, this is not this situation is not only hard for Europe. Actually, for me and my colleagues working at the EUMI office has been very difficult, especially a few months ago when the situation in Lebanon reached the peak of a crisis, when, as UNICEF reported, almost 1.2 million people were affected from the situation, from the conflict in Gaza, but not only. Like receiving reports and calls with our colleagues that were based in Lebanon put us in a situation that we felt even very difficult to say the word of encouragement in that situation. But actually, our volunteers over there and our colleagues in Lebanon surprised and inspired all of our office and our chapters around the Europe and Middle East as they step up. Actually, they stop their educational programs. They come together with other local NGOs such as Family Federation for World Peace and Unification Lebanon and the Missionary Village. So they came together to provide humanitarian aids, to use the funds they had to support with food, with hot meals that they actually cook themselves. And over a period of 4 weeks, there were approximately like 600 hot meals that were delivered, and also they delivered water for this period of 4 weeks, like for approximately 100 families. And the main target for them was to help especially women and mothers with children. As the situation continued to escalate back then, people even were removed from the streets, because initially there were a lot of people on the streets, and at some point the local authorities, they gave the notification that they needed to find shelter somewhere, because otherwise they may be tagged as terrorists and as having intentions to conduct such violent actions. So in that cases, the schools actually served as the best places where a lot of people that didn't have an option, they gathered together. We should think of how the situation was back then, of cleanliness, lacking water and lacking other basic facilities. So in this situation, like our team over there, they step up and take actions. It was a very difficult time also for us, monitoring their activities, because we're concerned of people's life. But so not only for them, but also for the situation that unfortunately is not properly addressed. And these are just some pictures for you, just to have a look and maybe a taste, a feeling of the work that people have done over there in very difficult situations. What's more concerning for us actually, as a UMI, is seeing the situation back in Europe. So what's the situation we are facing for a long time? It's not a new thing that actually a lot of countries, such as like big countries that actually are the main target based on the statistics for the refugees coming from the Middle East, like such as Germany, France, Spain or Greece, actually, and Italy as well, they faced a great number of people and refugees, and they were struggling with their facilities to address their needs and to properly take care of them. But beside that, actually, as you may have followed the news in Europe, recently we have a raised tendency against the refugees, seeing them as beneficiary of our taxpayers, and that actually they don't deserve to be treated and to use public service that are funded from European Union citizens. This we have followed this development with great concern, and what the situation made us to realize as a UMI and as YSP was that okay, providing humanitarian aid is one thing, and that's very close related to the life of the people and survival. But there should be work done also regarding helping people to develop empathy for the people that are struggling, for refugees, that to also try to understand what they are going through, how hard may have been for them to come, to made it through the sea, to made it through the borders illegally, to for what, for a life that has dignity, you know. So in that kind of face with this, we thought, okay, we need actually, and we can develop programs that help especially young people, the new generation, to develop empathy and to work together, like not people that judge, but people that if there is a problem, if there is a issue that they are having on society, to come together and to work it out and contribute to its solution. And speaking in this regard, our chapter in Kosovo, actually YSP Balkan, that's also operating in North Macedonia as well. They've done a great job in this regard. They came together to collaborate with institutions, and by this I mean with QBT University, University of Tetovo, and the center that's responsible for refugees here in Kosovo, and to consult with them regarding how we should give a better shape to our main training programs as Peace Designer. And we received their feedbacks, and we included them on the materials that and the trainings that we provide. We so like these are just some pictures from the trainings and activities that we have done with young peoples. Mainly they are like high school students and university ones, like from 15 to 24, 25 years old, and providing these spaces and including the mental health and including this concept of like giving them some knowledge as well about the refugees, and trying to make through practical, like they call it game, but not like simulation, maybe that's the best word to say it, to try to think and put themselves in a scenario of being a displaced person, losing everything they have, not being able to be with their families and relatives, and how they would feel, how that would make, and trying to see with different perspective the other side of the story. And definitely we like if we see the results that have been achieved in the past 3 years, it has been amazing, and we have tried very hard, as you was asking me what we can do to make it sustainable. Actually, one of the things that we also realize is that we need to bring institutions on the table. Even though government, they have responsibility to help, they have responsibility to address these issues. We have to also include them in our efforts to help refugees and to help on mental health and to help other young people facing these issues. So over this period of three years, we had almost 206 students that completed the trainings. We had 8 peace initiatives projects that actually students developed themselves during these trainings. And what was also inspiring for us is that students coming up with ideas related to the projects, to the sexual education that's also very strongly related with mental health. Also empowering women and girls, especially high school students, to consider like being part of the police forces, because especially in the Balkans, it's mainly seen as a job that is done by males, and the women are not very much supported or encouraged. And has been definitely a journey of inspiration for us, and that we are sharing these experiences. And a great achievement that we'll consider that came early this year for us, for Rayumi, but also came from YSP Balkan, is the collaboration agreement that was signed with the municipalities of Mitrovica. It's a north city of Kosovo, focal point of conflict, very tensions for the Kosovo and the Balkan, as well as we have majority of Albanians living in one side of the city, and the other ones are Serbs living on north. So we have signed 2 collaboration agreements for a period of 2 years, and going forward by the second half of this year, they are mental health trainings foreseen for the young people living there, trying to bring from both sides. And also we are very based on the experience with the Lebanon. We are considering as an office how to further empower this kind of trainings that also tackle especially this development of sensitivity for the people that are displaced, for refugees and migrants as well. Definitely, before closing, a part of this inspiration of the work that we are doing are definitely the people that are on the field, and but also the founder of YSP, that's Dr. Jahankhah, which herself has been a refugee. She has fled North Korea and during the Second World War to the south, and all her life she has definitely supported a lot of peace initiatives, and YSP South exist and came from her as a platform, as was shared in the beginning, when young people can come together and young people can contribute. So thank you very much for listening, and we are very happy that we have given this space to share that the practical work, and like also theory and policies are very important, but also findings from the fields. So really, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Miss Lala. This was very powerful. We are very grateful for all the contributions you have made and for sharing your insights. What I learned from you is that you are actually, I agree with that, in designing peace and leadership programs for smooth simulation, acculturation, and integration of refugees. We shouldn't only focus on refugees, but we should also invite and involve locals in these initiatives. I also love the idea of engaging the students and inspiring them to design the training programs. It must be very empowering and really inspiring them to think like agents of change. I love that. Thank you so much. Now I would like to open the discussion to our audience. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Seems that everything has been clear. We will give 1 more minute. Yes, please.
I'm sorry, it just took me a minute to find where the hand button is. First, I just want to say thank you, Aysan, for putting this together. Thank you to all the speakers for all of your informative conversations, and I can't wait to hear what everyone else has to say in the audience. I don't have any specific questions about refugees, only because I deal with them myself, and we work with Aysan and Farishta. She's an advisor for the organization that I work with. But I just want to ask if any of the speakers have a story to share that really made them passionate about refugees and the work that they do.
I do. Can share that. I have a friend who is a medical doctor who actually does psychosocial support in Afghanistan for many, many years in an NGO, and you know the difficulties there in his working with young people, with males and females, and using arts and music, and you know the terror that happened with the Taliban takeover the day the music died, and that girls then were set back so much in their education, and his sharing the stories of the trauma of these girls who had to go backwards when they were going forwards. It makes me even cry right now. And he lives in the Washington area, and he works with refugees. And it's a very important work. Dr. Wace area is his name. But here's the thing. He was actually visiting his family in Afghanistan when the withdrawal took place. And so the tremendous trauma that happened for his family when they were at the airport for ages and days, and he was beaten in front of his children. So the point I want to make about is that this is a person, as many of the people who are on this group here, who has been helping refugees and helping them get through their trauma, women and men and boys and girls. And he experienced such tremendous trauma himself in this terrible withdrawal that happened, which gave him a totally new dimension. So I just want to appreciate all of the people who are here on this panel, and also on this event that Aysan has put together, who are devoting themselves to all this work. And Ava Sanders, I know, has been here. She has a chapter in my book about that I mentioned before about coming to America and the psychological issues. And so I think I want to just encourage everyone to encourage their friends too to get involved in this issue. Thank you.
I'm gonna jump into, I have a story too, if that's okay, that I wanted to share with you guys. So the inspiration behind everything that I do and my refugee story is my mom. My mom came here at the tender age of 17, an unaccompanied minor, fake passport. A fake visa, got off the plane, was detained, arrested, cuffed, and they asked her, you know, why do you have a fake passport? Why are you here? And she said, I'm here to seek political asylum. And I think watching her, living in that home, watching her go to ESL classes, quizzing her for citizenship classes by the time I was 8 years old, filling out USCIS, well, now, back then it was INS, now it's USCIS forms by the time I was 10, having a very different childhood as the child of a refugee, as opposed to my classmates that are, you know, have play dates at the playground, which I had, but, you know, I'd come home and be dealing with a very different experience. And I think that has inspired me to do everything that I do in my life.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing these beautiful stories. And thank you so much, Sophia, for bringing this question. It's sometimes nice to pause and really reflect. What is fueling our passion? Because this is not an easy journey. And sometimes pausing and reflecting on what makes us passionate is so important. to fuel our battery to move forward. Thank you.
Can I quickly share that too, Aysan? I'm just so inspired by what Dr. Judy and Freshter said, right? Like we have our own personal connections and stories that moved us and that we hold their stories today. And Freshter, I'm the same way. I was thinking of my mom. You know, she is still in Myanmar, Thai Myanmar border right now. She got displaced. But one story I want to quickly share was that when I was a child, my father was a former political prisoner in Burma. He was arrested for 5 years. And, you know, I often talk about him because he's like an activist that everyone looks up to. And, you know, but I often like now talking about it was all only possible because my mom was holding that emotional labor and safety and the fact that I stay alive and not only I got educated, I'm in the US, it's all thanks to her, you know, like, and so I think a lot about, you know, her own story, and she's this quiet, you know, like a beautiful woman, but and she doesn't speak a lot, but each word she says is so impactful and wise. And so she also reminds me that there's so much strength in being soft, so much strength it took within her heart not to become hardened, not to be full of hatred and cruelty that she received, but she still have that so much love and compassion and hope. One thing my parents instilled in me is that hope is revolutionary. Hope is revolutionary because, you know, they're activists and, you know, being an activist is doing everything that perpetrators of violence don't want you to do. So they said that you not losing hope is revolutionary. So I just want to honor my mom who has that spirit of hope in a gentle, impactful way that I always carry in my heart. And, you know, she is currently not home, of course, on the border, but I'm tapping into her hope every time I need it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that. We have some questions in the chat. I can just read them. One of them comes from Ellie Highwood. I volunteer with a group that supports refugees in the UK with belongings and clothes, but I have no therapy experience and neither do many of the other volunteers. I do think I am reasonably culturally competent, but what is the most useful advice you can give for how to support refugee women and children as volunteers with no specific training?
I'll just say very quickly to thank you, Elise, for saying that. And there's other questions in the chat also. Marcia also mentioned the same thing, that I always teach my students and my supervisees that don't worry about not having a PhD in something and years of training. You just need to be present. So you have to come with your heart and people will get it. I've been around the world, in Ramallah even. I don't speak Arabic, but working with the children there and the families, just coming with your heart, smiling and showing you care, being expressive, people get it. They understand and they feel your heart and your energy.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy. I have a couple things to add to that, if that's okay. Ellie, first of all, I would say, I don't know how it is in the UK, but I do think that anybody who deals with war-torn folks, refugees, displaced, mental health first aid training is very easy. It's a couple of days. Sometimes it's one day of just 5 or 6 hours of training. Having everybody on the team to have that, you don't need to diagnose, you don't need to necessarily, you know, you just need to triage, right? Just that triaging and being able to differentiate, like, okay, this person needs professional help or this person just needs somebody to talk to. I think that's one thing that you guys can do. The second thing that I would say is to find somebody. For example, if you're serving the Afghan community, make sure you have an Afghan liaison to always share ideas with. We have little circles of people. I shouldn't say little, because I should say the work that they do is big, but the amount of them is small, right? In every community, we try to have, like, across the nation, a few community liaisons that folks can call on. Oh, Firishta's Afghan. I'm not too sure about this. Let me give her a call and ask her if this is the right thing to do, or if how I can approach this from a sense. Try to identify somebody that you can go to. It could be a person of faith. It could be somebody from your community. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Frishta. We have another question by Mazia, but it's very similar to the previous question. So you addressed it in your answer, but I'm going to read it. I'm a pharmacy student representative, the International Pharmaceutical Students Federation. I really appreciate hearing from the panelists today and gaining insight into how healthcare professionals can improve their counseling to better support refugee women. What advice would you give to students on educating themselves to become more culturally competent in order to effectively support diverse patient populations in the pharmacy setting? I also found the comparison between insulin and trauma medication in relation to mental health stigma particularly insightful, and I will definitely incorporate the perspective when speaking with patients. Thank you so much, Mazia, for your questions. Thank you so much, Ellie. I hope your questions were addressed by our panelists. So we are reaching the end. Thank you to our exceptional panelists today for sharing their wisdom, insights, and to all of you for being part of this important conversation. A special thank you to the International Association of Applied Psychology and the International Association of Youth and Students for Peace for co-sponsoring this event and for their continued commitment to advancing mental health resilience and leadership globally. We are also grateful for the NGO New York CSW69 Forum for providing this platform to bring these crucial issues to the forefront. Today, we have explored the challenges, mental health, resilience, and leadership of refugee women. But this is just the beginning. Real change happens when we turn insights into action. Refugees did not choose to be displaced, yet they continue to show incredible strength in the face of adversity. They deserve more than mere survival. They deserve the opportunity to build fulfilling lives, to thrive, and to experience joy just like anyone else. Let us commit to advocating for policies that support mental health, amplifying refugee women's voices, and creating spaces where they can lead and shape their own futures. Together, we can help build a world where refugee women are not just seen as victims of displacement, but as powerful leaders, change makers, and contributors to society. Thank you so much. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, I will write my email address in the chat. Feel free to reach out. Thank you for joining us today. I look forward to connecting with all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Judy. Thanks, everyone. You are on mute.
You did a phenomenal job.
So much,
Since-
Dr. Judy.
oh my God. I mean, really, you were brilliant, so articulate, and so gracious. You are so gracious and beautiful. Really, look at you.
So much, Dr. Judy. You always encourage me. I'm really grateful for all the support I have received from you. I really, really appreciate you.
Oh, you deserve it. Really, you are a superstar. Really, what you are doing for the world and what you will do for I mean, and the intelligence that you have, besides your outer beauty, you're such a beautiful person, really.
You
And
too, Dr.
so
Judy.
mature, and so worldly, and so well expressed, really. You're just a treasure. And I'm so moved by everything that you did, the hard work you put into this, the communications, the excellent writing, and how you delivered this. You just, you know,
Thank you, Dr. Judy. We've been receiving a lot of support from you. We're really grateful, and I hope we continue doing the good work that we're doing. We are grateful for your contributions and guidance and mentorship, everything. And hopefully we can continue doing this.
absolutely, really. Have a wonderful day. Feel great about yourself. See you soon.
You too,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Judy. See you. Bye. Bye, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.